I get to introduce to you somebody I consider a long-term friend. I hope she does, because we worked together on and off for about 3 years. She reminds me consistently that I invaded her office, took over in the end of one of her desks, and worked with her and brought lots of pain into her world as we dealt with issues of compliance and all sorts of things. But the thing I really want to say is, if you have any doubt whether women should be in ministry or not, watch this woman. I'll just say it like that. She, for me, is an example of somebody who not only can clearly articulate her faith and beliefs, but lives it on a daily basis. As a woman who has set up her own ministry, where she is now invited all over the world to teach people how to hear the voice of God. I have had the privilege of being a part of a little piece of that journey, and have heard the story of the whole journey on a number of occasions. Hopefully she won't tell you the parts that I'm in. But I want to encourage you to listen to Tania today. Pastor Tania Harris is, for me, an example of a woman after God's own heart, a woman who takes time to listen carefully, to hear that which God would say, and then goes and takes the risk and steps out to do that thing. And then not only goes by herself, but then wants to join hands with many people around them and take them on the journey with her. So she's not the sort of great oracle you see sometimes in our faith, where someone will stand up and says, God has spoken to me. Rather, she comes alongside and says, God can speak to you. Why don't you listen with me? So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend and minister pastor, Tania Harris.
I'll be your friend for just a little bit longer after that, Pete. I joke that Pete's the only phone number I still know off by heart. Do you remember when you used to know phone numbers by heart? Because he was our consultant at Hillsong College, and I used to call him on a regular basis. 0411 845 484. Is that it? Yeah, see? No, we didn't have a speed dial back in those days. It was August 2019, and a group of archaeologists made a startling discovery on the north coast of Peru. They discovered a mass grave, a burial site, where over 200 child skeletons were found. They were aged between the ages of 4 and 14 years old. And it was discovered that they came from the Chimu Empire from about 1400 years ago, and they had all been slaughtered at exactly the same time. The reason why they had been slaughtered, the archaeologists surmised, was that it was a ritual that was designed to control the effects of the El Nino weather phenomenon, a problem in that area that could cause landslides and destroy their villages and their livelihood. So they offered this mass sacrifice. It's brutal. It sounds appalling, doesn't it? But this kind of ritual is not that uncommon in the ancient world. In fact, we see those kind of rituals taking place in the world of the Old Testament, in the ancient Near East world. It was a very religious world. People worshipped many gods. And the gods that they worshipped were often connected to different territories and to different natural phenomena. And when you had needs in your life, the way to relate to the gods was that you would try and appease them. For example, if you needed to conceive a child, you would worship or you would make sacrifices to the goddess of fertility. You would pray, you would offer food, and if you were really desperate, if you really wanted to bring change, you would offer your children. It is that context that we see a very famous story. You may know it. It's told in the book of 1 Kings 19. Someone spoke about it yesterday. It's in this context that God, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, reveals himself to a man called Elijah. Elijah had just had a showdown with a wicked king and a wicked queen, and he was running for his life. He finds himself on the backside of the desert. He's hungry, he's depressed, he's despairing for his life, and the God of heaven wants to show himself to Elijah. But how does he do it? Well, you know the story. First of all, there's a wind. The gods are often seen to come in the wind, but this God wasn't seen in the wind. Then there's a fire, but God wasn't in the fire. An earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. How did the God of the Bible reveal himself to Elijah? He came as a voice. He spoke. He spoke words that were personal. Words that revealed that God knew Elijah's situation. He knew what he was going through. He knew his past. And then he speaks into his future. He speaks to him about his purpose. He speaks to him that he's not alone. He tells him what to do. This God is unlike any God in the ancient pantheon. This God speaks back. This God is knowable. See, in the ancient world, you couldn't really know what the gods were thinking. You would try and appease them. You would try and work out what was happening in the circumstances. If things weren't going well, if there was a famine or if there was a drought, you needed to worship even harder. But this God is knowable. And the way that he is knowable is that he speaks. You see, it's language, it's speech, it's two-way conversation that makes God personal, that makes God relational. You see, we talk about having a personal relationship with God, don't we? But what does that actually mean? Well, we know that in human relationships, if I want to get to know someone, I need to talk to them. But actually, I need to listen to them. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with someone who does all the talking? No nudging anyone right now. See, it doesn't make for a good relationship, does it? You can't really get to know someone unless they speak back. Our God is personal. Our God is knowable. And the way to know him is to hear from him. See, we've been talking about this conference about vision and how to follow the vision of God. But our God, to receive his vision, it's rooted first in relationship. It's rooted in knowing him personally. See, when Jesus came to earth, he showed us fully what God was like. And he sent us a person, someone that was knowable. The incarnation, Jesus comes as the Word in the flesh. The prophets spoke the words of God, but Jesus came as the Word of God. He showed us what God was like. See, this God comes and walks with us. This God comes and talks with us. He walks along the streets of Jerusalem with the disciples. How good would it have been to be a disciple of Jesus? How good would it be to have coffee with Jesus right now? You see, you could talk to him and you could hear him speak back. The disciples could walk along the streets and ask him their questions. They could talk about the things of the kingdom over meals of bread and olives. They could listen to the voice of Jesus as he spoke on the temple steps. They got to know God personally. And Jesus expressed his love by knowing them and speaking to each one of them personally. So you can imagine the horror, can't you, when Jesus announced that he was leaving. Hey guys, I'm going. What? What? Jesus? You're going? What? You can't go. You're about to give us the Great Commission to go into all the world. and preach the gospel to all nations. Well, we've never done that before. You've told us to build the church. We don't even know what a church looks like, Jesus. How are we going to know what you're saying to us? How are we going to hear our questions being answered? How are we going to know what's on your heart? How to do this mission that you have given us? And what does Jesus say? It will be better if I leave, because then I will send you my Spirit. And my Spirit is going to continue to speak to you. No matter where you go, my Spirit's not going to be limited by my body, by this geography. My Spirit's going to go with you beyond the streets of Jerusalem, beyond the temple steps, into all Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. My Spirit is going to speak to you wherever you go. And my Spirit's going to do two things. My Spirit is going to remind you of everything that I have already established. My Spirit's going to remind you about the truths of the kingdom. My Spirit's going to remind you about the reality of salvation, how I came to show my love and to die for you. My Spirit's going to remind you about what God is like. My Spirit's going to remind you of the foundational truths of the gospel. The truths that are laid out for us now in the Scriptures. My Spirit's going to remind you of those truths. But you're going to have so many more questions. And I can't tell you everything right now. But don't worry, because my Spirit is going to speak to you about things to come. Those questions that you have about carrying on the mission, my Spirit's going to help you. My Spirit's going to answer those questions. My Spirit's going to continue to bring my wisdom to you. And of course, Jesus dies on a cross. He fulfills his mission. He rises again. He ascends to heaven. And then the moment that everyone has been waiting for. It's the day of Pentecost, and the disciples are assembled together that day. There are a lot of things that happen, lots of miraculous phenomena. But have you noticed the thing that the Apostle Peter identifies as the moment that they've all been waiting for? He stands up in the crowd and he says, "This is what was promised, that when my Spirit comes," Jesus' words are fulfilled. "But when my Spirit comes, your young men will have visions, your old men will have dreams, and your sons and daughters will prophesy." Well, what does that mean? I remember sitting in church growing up, and I used to hear those words being read, and I thought, well, you know, sometimes there's old men in church, and sometimes the preacher, you know, he goes on a little bit on and on and on, and those old men, they sit up the back, and because he's been preaching for so long, they fall asleep and they have dreams, right? Is that it? And the young men, because they're full of so much zeal, enthusiasm, they're sitting up the front row and they're writing down their 10-year plan for their life. They've got vision. Is that what it means? No, not quite. The main way that God spoke throughout the Old Covenant, when he spoke to the prophets, was in dreams and visions. He used a picture language. Well, there's nothing that spooky about it. They often say a picture tells 1,000 words. We saw it yesterday, didn't we, when Pastor Cheryl shared about the vision of the dry bones. You see, God could have said in words, "I want to restore your hopes, Israel." But he didn't. He spoke in pictures. A valley of dry, brittle bones. They've been dead and bleached white by the sun. They've been there for so long, they're lifeless. And then what does he see? He sees this wind beginning to stir, and the dust begins to pile up, and the bones begin to rattle, and they begin to connect, and the joints come together, and flesh and sinews appear, and the wind continues to blow, and the flesh begins to turn pink, and they rise up as a mighty army. It's like a zombie movie. Powerful imagery of what God wants to do. He communicates through dreams and visions. Dreams just when we're asleep, visions when we're awake. No different, but the power of God's word to speak. How did God speak to his prophets? Through dreams and visions. What was the Apostle Peter saying on the day of Pentecost? In the same way that the prophets of old, the chosen ones, could hear my voice through dreams and visions. And then they would prophesy, they would pass the messages on to the people of Israel, because not everyone could hear. But now that my Spirit has come, who can hear from God? Sons and daughters, young and old, male and female, every person who chooses to follow Jesus can hear my Spirit. In the same way that the old covenant prophets did, through dreams and visions, they can hear my voice and they can prophesy, they can speak it out, they can pass it on. The beauty of this new covenant is that we can hear God's voice for ourselves. And what difference does that make? Well, that means that we can know him personally. This is the moment the old covenant prophets had waited for. Even Jeremiah, he longed for this time. He spoke about a time when the Spirit of God would write his words directly on each of our hearts, that we would not need to go to a neighbor. We would not need to go to somebody else. We would not need to go to a prophet to hear from God, because all would know him, from the least to the greatest. A vision that's rooted in relationship, that's based on knowledge of God. And it's not knowledge about God. See, you can know a lot about God, can't you? I used to know a lot about God, but I'd never heard his voice. So I knew God in the same way that you would know about the Queen of England. You could know a lot about the Queen from the pages of a magazine, can't you? You could know that she likes to drink a cup of tea. She likes bright colours. She likes corgis. She loves God. You could read about her, but you wouldn't know her for yourself until you heard her speak to you. See, the God of heaven wants us to know him. How do we get vision? It starts with pursuing a relationship. Every person who chooses to follow Jesus can hear God's voice for themselves. It's not about intellect. It's not about how many years I've been to Bible college and how much knowledge I have. It's not about how long I've been a Christian or how many church services I've attended. How do I get to hear from God? What do I need? I used to wonder that. Well, the truth is, I used to see some of the mystical types in church, the people who used to be able to pray for hours on end. And I used to look at them and think, I wish I could be like that. I've often said I'm the hard case. I'm the one who always finds it difficult to hear from God. My friend, she's very mystical. She's very sensitive. She walks into a room and she says things like, "Can you feel the presence of God?" And I'd be like, Where is that? People would pray for me and they would fall over. How do we get to hear God more? This is not based on personality. There's actually been research done that certain personality types are good at this. But it can't be based on personality. It can't be based on Bible knowledge. It can't be based on years of being a Christian, because God doesn't play favourites. His Spirit was given to sons and daughters, young and old. So how do I get good at hearing from God? Well, it's really quite simple. We make a decision to follow. We make a decision to follow. Jesus said, "My people listen for my voice, and they follow." What does it mean to be a disciple? We were talking about that yesterday. What is the recipe? What does it mean? Well, simply, it means to follow Jesus. Well, how do I follow Jesus? Well, Jesus gave us his continuing voice to speak to us, sons and daughters, young and old, to remind us of everything that Jesus established, but to speak to us about things to come, to speak to us individually about our lives. The Spirit speaks to us so that we may know him. We need to make a decision to follow. And when we do that, we become disciples. When we do that, he gives us his mission, but it comes out of relationship. And sometimes what we need to do is lay our agendas down and say to God, whatever you want to say to me, I will follow. I heard a friend of mine actually, he loved God and he really wanted to serve God. He wanted to be in ministry, and one day he was offered a church that he had been working in to be the new senior pastor. So he said, well, I really want to know what God is saying. And so he began to pray. He said, God, speak to me. Should I take on this church? I really want to know your vision for my life. I really want to follow you. Jesus, speak to me about your vision for my life. Shall I take on this church? He waits. And then he hears the Spirit speak. Make the bed. What? Make the bed? Huh? My wife makes the bed. I don't make the bed. She does a really good job of making the bed. Like, she has all those pillows and those cushions and lines them up. Oh, yeah. My wife makes the bed. God, shall I take on this church? Speak to me. God, I want to follow you. I want to know what your vision for my life is. God, speak to me. Make the bed. My wife makes the bed. I don't make the bed. She has all that special patterning of how to make the bed. Make the bed. It's very quiet in the room right now. God was speaking. He was calling my friend to follow. My friend went to his wife and he said, honey, I think God's telling me to make the bed. Some of the men in the room look really shell-shocked at this point. He said, honey, show me how to make the bed. So she said, okay, this is how you line up the pillows. This is how you make it. And you put the frills here. And he started to make the bed every morning, the way his wife told him to. A month later, God spoke again. Now you can lead the church. See, people talk to me all the time. They say things like, oh, Tania, I find it so hard to hear God's voice. God's not speaking to me. How do you hear God's voice? See, I've been praying about this job and I've been praying about this area and should I buy this house? Should I marry this person? God, speak to me. I really want to know your vision for my life. And the truth is that God has already been speaking. But this person just didn't like what God said. He's saying, make the bed. He's speaking to them already. but they said no. And I don't know about you, but I've never managed to change the topic of conversation. Have you? Has anyone ever been successful in that? See, at that point we have a choice. Will we follow? Fellowship is what makes us disciples. Fellowship is what grows us up. Fellowship is what makes us more like Jesus. Fellowship builds a platform of relationship that enables us to carry God's mission. That means that the most important question for each one of us right now is, what has the Spirit been talking to you about? Because the truth is that God speaks to us about very different things. Have you noticed that? He knows how to lead His people. He knows what grows us up. He knows what we need most to do to make us more like Jesus. And the truth is that when the continuing voice of Jesus, the voice of the Spirit speaks to us, it will ultimately lead us to a cross. Take up your cross and follow. See, what is God doing? He's transforming us. He's making us Christ-like. He's killing off the sin and the greed and the pride. And it's only as we follow, as the Spirit does His work in us, as we take up our cross, that we can be fully resurrected with Christ, that we can be fully entrusted to the mission of God. What is the Spirit speaking to you about right now? So often we come to God and we say, God, give us vision. Show me how to do this great thing for you. And He's saying, make the bed. He's saying, forgive that person. He's saying, learn to be generous. He's saying, be gracious to that next door neighbor that's mean to you. He's saying, do the dishes. He's making us more like Jesus. And what qualifies us to carry His mission is our ability to follow. I love the story of Abraham, the father of our faith, the paradigm, the patterning of his story. Have you noticed it? I mentioned it yesterday. It starts with this incredible vision. I want to bless you and make you a blessing so that all the nations will be blessed. Wow. What a vision. What a spectacular reality. But then, as Abraham begins to believe those words of promise, as Abraham hears from God in a vision, he receives it, he believes it, and then he begins to follow. But what you'll notice about his journey is that there are altars all along the way where God continues to speak to him about the vision, and He begins to transform him into the person he needs to be to fulfill that. And he comes to these altars, and each time he's faced with this question, will you follow? See, we made that choice to follow Jesus at the beginning, didn't we? But we need to continue to make that choice. We continue to say yes to Jesus. I follow you. I listen for your voice and I follow. And the ultimate altar that we see towards the end of Abraham's life is when God calls him to make that very unusual sacrifice. See, Abram didn't really know what God was like. He was used to all the other gods in the pantheon. They demanded child sacrifice. But what was this Yahweh like? When God speaks to offer up his son, it wasn't such an unusual request against the backdrop of all the other gods that demanded child sacrifice. But Abraham yields his only son, not just the one he loved, but the child of the promise, the very dream itself, the vision that he'd been called to, this amazing work. And God says, will you offer it up on the altar? His intent was never to kill his son. You and I know that God's not into child sacrifice, but Abram didn't know that. Not until God said, stop. But listen to the words that God says about Abraham. He says, now that you have done this, now that you have not withheld your one and only Son, the thing that's most precious, the vision, the plan of God that I've called you for, now that I know that you worship me first, now that I know that you follow me first, now that I know that you will do whatever I ask you to do, now I can expand the vision. Not only will you be one who births a nation, but kings will now come from you. What does God do? He says, once this was your vision, but now that I've seen your heart to follow, now I'm going to reveal more of myself to you. Now that you know me, you've heard my voice, you've followed. Now I can entrust you with even more. A vision, a mission that's consistent with the plan of Jesus, but it is dependent on our choice to follow, our choice to listen to the voice of God, the continuing voice of Jesus, calling us, speaking to us, making us more like him. And as we do that, we're going to die to ourselves. We're going to find ourselves on a cross. All that sin, all that pride, all that old flesh is going to die away. But then we're going to be resurrected with him. And he's going to give us so much more. The cry of the Apostle Paul at the end of his life was these words in Philippians 3:10. He said, "Oh, that I may know him." That I may know him. Is that your prayer today? What is the Spirit speaking to you about? And are you following? That's the question of God for every single one of us as we pursue the mission and the vision of God. Amen? Amen.